What was the start of your love affair with the idea of Gallipoli as a story and the whole Anzac Beach thing, Peter?
Certainly visiting the battlefield itself.
And what brought you there?
Well, I was on my way to London for the opening of Picnic, actually, and I'd thought of doing a story on the First War, Australians in the First War, for some time. Gallipoli seemed a bit obvious, but I thought it was logical to drop in and have a look at the battlefield, because staggeringly, it's as it was after the evacuation. It's a military zone still,
yeah.
And you can walk through the trenches and easily bring to mind just what it must have been like.
But the trenches that existed in those days are still there?
Yes, they've tumbled in, and they're only 3 or 4 feet deep, but there are no farmers, there are practically no tourists. A very remote spot, very beautiful spot, and I think a very powerful atmosphere clings about that peninsula still.
Because the thing is that your film will surprise many in as much as it isn't a sort of war movie in the John Wayne tradition of war movies or anything of that kind. It's more of a story about the friendship between two young men who go off to war.
Exactly. We tried a number of approaches initially, David Williamson and I, the scriptwriter, and I think the first drafts were far too documentary. I think we tried to tell too much detail about the battles and not enough about the people.
Yeah.
And, the light bulb went on at one point, and we said this should be about a couple of Anzacs. Let's take a country bloke and a city type, and let's get to know them, because that way one will learn more about Gallipoli than all the battles joined together.
Yeah. Actually, that's the thing I think that gets you right into the film. You do know the two young guys, and by the time they actually get to fight and what happens to them, I think you are fairly emotionally involved. You're seeing the war through their eyes without just seeing a big blow up on the screen.
Exactly, and I mean, one's extremely fortunate that there are still so many survivors of the battle alive today, wonderful men, and David and I separately could go and talk to them, and they would recall with the most extraordinary memory details of the daily life. I mean, what they ate and what they said to each other, and what it smelt like. I remember one old chap telling me about wild thyme that grew just near their little dugout, and how they'd crush it up and put it into their bully beef to give it a little more flavour.
Yes, it needed too. When I said, of course, you're seeing it through the eyes of two guys who become friends, I'm not trying to make it sound like a small film, because it's the most expensive Australian film ever made, $2 million, and what, 4,000 in the cast?
Yes.
4,000.
Extras.
And we think we've got trouble with the big broadcast.
You did a pretty good job with that.
Thank you. But 4,000, how did you go handling? I mean, it's like, it's not so much making a film as running an army, isn't it?
It was often that we compared the making of the film to the fighting of the battle in a crazy way.
Yeah.
But we didn't ever have 4,000 on screen at once. I think 600 was the greatest number we had, but extremely difficult, because people, couple of 100 yards away in the background would start doing things that weren't appropriate to 1915, or larking about, or closer up smoking filter tip cigarettes and things. So we had sort of platoon leaders who were designated with a group of, say, no more than 20 men, and they trained their little group to do the various activities appropriate.
Yeah.
And,
some of it was shot in Egypt, of course, but some of it was also shot at Port Augusta.
Port Lincoln.
Port Lincoln, yeah. How did the townsfolk get into it? Did they enjoy being a movie city for a while?
I don't know how they initially thought. It was probably with some suspicion, but rightly so. But by the end of the filming, they were as close, I think, to the real Anzacs as possible. I mean, initially there were problems with haircuts and things. I mean, it's very difficult to cut people's hair today. And much treasured side levers, and people frightened their bald patches will be revealed, and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And anyway, the hair came down. There were bags of hair.
Yeah.
We used to think, what can we do with this hair? Is there some way we can sell it to people to make couches or something? But they joined in, and they resisted some of the discipline, because at first you had, obviously, to get them into a bit of ship shape, you had to give them some arms drill and a bit of marching, and didn't like that too much. But after a few days, particularly as we used to tell them what the scenes they were about to go into, give them some background, hand out some photographs and books, and in the end they were telling us what to do, and I remember one night, after having them hours out in the boats for the landing sequence, I said, "Oh, come on, fellas, you better go home, you must be exhausted." And one of the toughest extras came up to me, a real complainer on the first day, and said, "Listen, mate, the real Anzacs had to walk up into the trenches under shell fire after arriving in these boats, so we're lucky. So don't feel that you have to treat us softly." I said, "Back, down."
Pardon me, I'm only the director. You're the Anzacs,
I'm
right?
glad they didn't have any ammunition. They might have started
You should have been in terrible trouble.
But they were a marvellous lot of people, and we still keep in touch with them. And some of them kept their hair short, which is interesting, and still like a badge.